if you look at professional sports teams and even college teams, the University of Alabama would have a different team every single year, but there was an expectation in terms of the standard at which they would play at, even though they would have different players. It's the same thing when it comes to your law firm. There should be a standard and expectation in terms of how intake is handled and the customer service, the client experience, how people are responded to, also how every case is worked. All of that should remain consistent. So I think a lot of times it's just building up your team. I'm Michael Mogill, founder and CEO of Crisp, the nation's #1 law firm growth company. I've built my business through practice, not theory. Crisp started with just $500 to my name and has grown to over 8 figures in revenue over the last few years, earning a spot on the Inc. 500 list of the fastest growing private companies in America. Our approach has been to take everything we've learned about generating massive growth within our own organization and help the country's most ambitious and committed law firm owners do the same for theirs. In each episode of this podcast, I sit down with innovative market leaders from the legal industry and beyond to learn from those who thrive in the face of adversity, challenge the status quo, and define what it means to be a true game changer.
This is Jessica, Head of Coaching Strategy at Crisp, and today we're flipping the script for another special edition episode to get Michael's take on how to transition from being the face of your firm to building a brand that stands on its own, growing beyond your personal capacity without losing what made your firm successful in the first place, and why letting go isn't losing control, but gaining the ability to scale.
It comes to a point where as you grow and the case volume increases, it would be impossible for you to be the person providing updates to every single client on every single case and the person working every single case either. I mean, if you have like 10,000 cases. So the best thing you can do is to really build up your team.
That's coming up on the Game Changing Attorney podcast. Welcome back for another AMMA.
Excited to be back. I'm excited to hear what the questions are for the AMMA this week. I'll also say that I'm excited because our oldest daughter is coming to terms with accountability.
Cause and effect.
Cause and effect. And I don't like to make use of threats, right? Because there's different parenting strategies, and some will hear this and maybe disagree.
Of course.
But if you've had children, you've never had to make threats, then maybe you haven't had children, okay? So every night when we do bedtime, we'll either read a book, a story, watch Bluey, something. It's just us and the kids. And then when it's right after, it's time for bed, I tuck her in. We call it cocoon, right?
Yeah.
Where I tuck the sheets in. We used to call it sarcophagus.
Yeah.
Right. I remember when your mom came over and stayed with us, and our oldest asked her to do sarcophagus. Your mom said, "Well, what is sarcophagus?" It's when you wrap the child up tightly in the blankets,
like a mummy.
Like a mummy, so she can go to sleep. Anyway, after that is taking place, we kiss goodnight, and I turn on the noise machine and the humidifier. And I've checked off every item in my in-flight checklist. Then we say, okay, great. I love you. Good night. Right? Now, our oldest, sometimes shortly after this, will scream for me. And I'll be back downstairs. We have our, 30 minutes of relaxation. And I'm like, what? We did the whole routine. We put her down. I come up there, and it's usually something small, like the blanket became undone, or there was I think her bathroom door was open. She didn't like that, or something,
It's
right?
very particular, this child. I'm not sure where she gets that.
Yeah, I know. I wonder where she gets that. So we've come up with a new rule that when I leave her room, so long as it's not something where she's hurt or something like that, that's it. I'm not coming back in there that night again, because it's like, when daddy's done, we're done, right? Same thing with mommy. Now, there is a repercussion if she calls me back up there. For any reason,
Yeah.
right? Outside of, obviously her health and safety. I have to put that asterisk there because there's going to be somebody listening saying, well, what if? It's like, look, we got 2 cameras in that room, first of all. We're constantly monitoring this child 24/7, 365, okay? Anyway, the penalty is what is called the thingamajigger. Now, she came up with this name. It is essentially a
lock on the door.
A lock on the door. It's like a little plastic device that keeps the door propped open slightly, but it can only be opened from the outside, right? So we can open it, but she can't open it, right? So it essentially, she's not able to.
She's trapped.
She's trapped in her room, basically. She hates that thing.
Hates.
Like, absolutely hates it. So
She would rather us cancel a Disney trip than put that thing on the door.
oh yeah, she's deathly afraid of this thingamajigger, right? The loss of just autonomy and independence. So earlier this week, put it down as normal. A few minutes later, after I leave the room, she cries for me again and says, "Daddy," right? And I come up there and I say, "All right, you know the drill," right? And I'm like, first of all, I'm like, "Is everything all right?" She's like, "Yes." Blanket had come a little undone. She wanted to get re-sarcophagus, right? I said, "Okay, I can do that." Here's the thing, though. Thingamajigger's going on the door, okay? She loses it.
Lost her mind.
Goes absolutely nuts till 11.
I'm with Misha. She's
Right,
like, what's going on?
Yeah.
What's Mia doing?
Yeah, like the youngest is asking what's going on. You're texting me. He's like, everything all right? I'm like, oh, yeah, everything's all right. You're just putting that thingamajigger on the door. And she is freaking out. And I tell her, I'm like, look, when you're freaking out, we talked about this. We got the breathing exercise. I taught her like the box breathing. SEALs do it. You can learn too, young lady. So eventually you got calmed down.
Yeah.
Right?
The best was
And
the next day, though.
The best part was the next day.
So I tell her, because I'm so proud of her, she has big feelings. I said, Mila, you calmed yourself down. She goes, I couldn't do it. I kept telling Daddy I could not calm down. And I said, well, you did it. She goes, I know, but I just felt my heart thumping. And then I felt it in my soul because that child is me. And I know her heart was thumping. And I'm so proud of her.
So here's the moral of the story. The very next night, come back, the same scenario, put her down as normal. We do the book, kiss goodnight. I get her sarcophagus. And I say, look, Mila, what is going to happen if I have to come back in here after I've left this room? And she said, you're going to put that thingamajigger on the door. And I'm like, that's right. And I'm like, is that what you want? She says, no, absolutely not. I'm like, so, okay, so we're going to sleep through the night. Not going to come back in here. And she's like, yeah. 5 minutes later, this child's screaming again, right? And now, so I go back up there, and I already have it with me. I got the thingamajigger with me. I just, even before I walk in, I already put it on the door. And I come in, and this time she's not freaking out. I'm like, what's up? What's going on? Right? This time was, I feel like the way the humidifier was facing or something like that, right? Like the direction of it. Okay. And I'm like, okay, but you know, thingamajigger's going to come on the door. She's like, I know, right? She had accepted her reality, and she knew. Maybe you didn't learn in one night, but you learn in two.
Yeah, and next time, third time's a charm. We'll see what happens.
There was no screaming. She didn't get all riled up. I'm very proud of her. And just because, she was starting to see cause and effect.
Yeah.
Of if I do this, then this happens, right? Sometimes I think, there's adults that still have not learned this.
Yeah.
Right? But if you can learn as a child, maybe it can help you later in life. So
fear the thingamajigger.
That's it, that thingamajigger. Maybe we should send them out as mailers to law firm owners. I'm like, what is this thing?
If you too would like a thingamajigger, please text Michael.
Yes. We'll send you one, all right? Anyway, if you're joining the podcast, this is the AMA where you guys submit your questions and we answer them. You can text us at 404-531-7691. And you can text us questions really about anything. Anything as long as it is business related, anything to do with firm growth, marketing, leadership, culture, hiring, etc., any of those things. And a lot of these questions end up here on the podcast. Jessica compiles them. The other episodes we do on the podcast are our traditional interview format episodes. We bring on an expert from the legal industry, even outside of the legal industry, and it's a one-on-one podcast, and then the encore editions, which are the most popular episodes of the Game Changing Attorney podcast that we bring back. Those are the three types of episodes. We got a couple new segments coming up, but I can't talk about those yet, but they will be released on this season of the podcast, so you guys will get to experience them soon. And outside of that, let's get on with it. How about that? Let's do this thing. What questions do we have this week?
All right, question number 1. Hello, Michael. Big fan of the podcast. I constantly hear the phrase, work on your business, not in your business. However, my past success has been based on me personally handling my client cases, and I've built a strong referral system where people want me providing the legal services. Also, not sure I can afford to replace myself this early on in my new business. We are 1.5 years old and practice PI. It seems there is a push to delegate client legal services while the owner focuses on the business. So how soon in your business did you stop doing everything and being 100% hands-on? I mean that in a very respectful way, of course.
No offense taken. So this is interesting. It's like, how soon do you get out of doing everything and in the weeds of doing everything? Like, when is the right time? I hate giving it depends answers. I really do.
Know.
Because this just sounds like so prescriptive, right? But the reality of it is that you really have to look at what are you trying to do? Like what is your vision for the firm? What is your vision for your future? Where are you trying to get to? If your goal is to grow and scale your firm and make a massive impact, then chances are like you have to find a way to be able to scale what you're doing. The sooner that you can figure that out, the sooner you can make the massive impact, right? So, but if your goal is, you just want to work on a few cases and just this is more of like a lifestyle business for you, then you're probably on a different timeline. Maybe there's not as much of a push to be able to expand your capacity because you're not at capacity. If I look back in our history, so started the business in 2012, I think that I started moving out of the weeds of the day-to-day. I mean, I was slow. Like I'm very much like a slow learner. So knowing what I know now, I think I took way too long. So I think it really probably started around 2017, maybe 5 years in, right? And I think that was way too late. But up until that point, I mean, I was doing everything. We were, even with just the videos, I was doing a lot of the filming, the editing, the project management, the sales, the marketing, the finances, the payroll, everything. What changed at that point, and maybe it happened a little bit earlier than 2017, but I feel like that at that point is where I really started the shift to working on the business. So it's about 5 years in, maybe a little sooner, maybe even in 2015. But regardless of the exact date and day that this took place, what I realized is that two things. One, I can only work so many hours in a day, and there's only so much that I can do. And then two, when people say work on things that are the highest and best use of your time, it's not to, downplay the value of certain types of work. It's not that by any means, but there is an opportunity cost to you allocating your time and focus to one area at the expense of not allocating your time and focus to another area. So for example, if I am running payroll and I can add a lot of value in terms of sales and marketing, well, I can't be doing those things while I'm running payroll. And if my entire day is filled with doing more operational tasks, finance tasks, like those types of things, then I'm essentially off the field in terms of moving the needle forward in other areas of the business. And if you think about what are the areas that are going to create the greatest impact and be able to help you scale, anytime you're not spending on those different areas is essentially an opportunity cost that you pay in terms of the price of how long it takes you to grow. And so it's really just a question of where are you trying to get to, right? If you are trying to, let's say it's a financial goal and you want to double the revenue of the practice, for example, and you know that's going to require more cases. And if you're going to have more cases, that means you're going to ultimately have to work on more cases. Perhaps that means that even just from a capacity standpoint, you couldn't possibly handle that amount of cases. That would require bringing on another lawyer, for example. Or even if you're investing more in marketing and you know it's going to require a lot of phone calls, you're the one answering the phones. If all of your time is spent answering the phones, then who's working the cases? And if you're working the cases, who's answering the phones? So maybe that requires hiring somebody on the intake side. There's not a definitive answer for everyone. It just comes down to what is right for you. Now, knowing what I know now, and this is, I look at it from the standpoint of if you do want to grow and scale, then you should be really focusing on freeing yourself up from anything, absolutely anything that is like that either you are not the absolute best at or that you add any sort of like unique value to that also is exciting and gives you energy. So it's kind of a blend of those things to where it's very difficult to replace that type of skill set. So I know a lot of lawyers, they're like great rainmakers. Right? It's very difficult to find another rainmaker to bring to the practice, bring in a ton of cases. So, and they do a great job of building relationships and referral partnerships and those sort of things. And if they're not doing those things, then there's not really a ton of new cases coming into the firm. So but that comes down to if they enjoy that, right? I guess the other thing I'm considering here is also, especially if you're very early on to the practice, is I didn't start moving myself out of certain areas until I had done enough of them, meaning that I had learned enough to where I felt that it gotten to a point of just repetition for me. It wasn't necessarily strategic thinking or thinking critically in any sort of way. It was just going through the motions, right? So if we look at something like running payroll, for example, there was figuring all that stuff out initially, right? In terms of how to set it up and how to make sure that everything is accurate and how do we audit it and so on. But then when you're doing it every 2 weeks, it's just a process and steps in a process. And I think, look, I don't know that I'm adding a unique value here. And that may extend to other things that, somebody listening to this that says, like, look, in terms of like case prep, it's no different in terms of like the way we do depositions. And like, I've done 1,000 of these or 5,000 of these. So it's like where you're no longer adding unique value to something, perhaps that's the time where you'd be able to start to scale out of it. So maybe that's another way to look at it. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I think it's just really looking at it again from the highest and best use of your time. So you were saying payroll, for example. Same thing goes for me. Once you had kind of offloaded those things to me, there came a time and place where that wasn't the best thing for me to be doing. I was booking all the travel. I was the project manager. I was the person, if the luggage got lost, they called me at 11 p.m. And so that wasn't what I was doing to add the most value to the business. And so really taking an audit and actually looking at what is every minute of my day, where is that time going? And is that truly adding value to the business? And also, is it bringing you energy? Because you'll find that you're really great at a lot of things, but just because you're good at them doesn't mean that they bring you energy or that they're great for the business.
Yeah, agreed. All right.
All right. So let's move on to question number 2. Michael, thanks for all your insights on the podcast. I founded my criminal defense firm 4 years ago, and we've experienced rapid growth. From just me now to 12 team members and 3 attorneys. The challenge I'm facing is that my identity has been so wrapped up in me being the attorney that clients specifically request. I've built our reputation on my trial success and personal approach with clients. As we grow, I know I need to step back from handling every case, but I'm struggling with how to transfer my personal reputation to the firm as a whole. We've lost a few potential clients when they learned I wouldn't personally handle their case. What did you do to stop being the face that every client demanded?
This is kind of like, you look at the double-edged sword of personal brand, right? And building personal brand to where if you establish a certain reputation and clout and credibility and even authority, that when somebody reaches out to you, especially in the early days, there is the expectation that they will, speak to you or work with you. Sometimes you'll be the one that answers the phone. You'll be the one to work their case. In many ways, we create this expectation because that's what is true, especially as, we're starting our practices and you are the one answering the phone. You are the one working their case, et cetera. And the worry is if you step away from that too much, that there is going to be either a misalignment of expectation or that people will think, okay, well, there's, quality has changed, or it's not the same anymore or whatever, right? But I would argue that, when someone's reaching out to a firm like Morgan & Morgan, they don't expect for John Morgan to answer the phone or John Morgan to work their case. And no different than, really any market leading firm. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to get great representation and they're not going to be valued. So I think a lot of it comes down to, if your goal is to not have to be the one that works every single case, and this, again, I want to make sure that this is heard correctly. This doesn't mean necessarily that you can't still be involved and that you are not working specific cases and taking certain cases to trial, maybe ones that you're interested in or that excite you, that are higher stakes, for example. Like, you can still stay on the field and be in on the action. Like, that's not, but it's just, it comes to a point where as you grow and the case volume increases, it would be impossible for you to be the person providing updates to every single client on every single case and the person working every single case either. I mean, if you have like 10,000 cases, right? It's impossible. So the best thing you can do is to really build up your team and invest in them and to build up their clout and their credibility. So it might be, your name on the shingle, but that's also, I think the reputation more so should align with the standard that exists within the firm, and to really start building up other people. So other lawyers that you may have in the firm, like their credibility, their expertise, other team members as a whole. I mean, basically the expectation should be that when they reach out to your firm, there's a certain value set and standard that's met. I mean, it's no different than if you look at certain professional sports teams and even like college teams, like, the University of Alabama would have a different team every single year, but there was an expectation in terms of the standard at which they would play at, right? And that they would compete at, even though they would have different players. So the standard didn't change. And I think it's the same thing when it comes to your law firm. Like, there should be a standard and expectation in terms of how intake is handled and like the customer service, the client experience, how people are responded to, like also, how every case is worked, the quality of the actual lawyers themselves, like all of that should remain consistent. So I think a lot of times it's just building up your team. And when I say building up, I don't mean like scaling in terms of adding headcount. I mean, especially
skill set,
like their skill set, but also marketing them and showcasing them and like what they do that's so unique. We know of a lot of really great practices that have great trial lawyers. It's not the named trial lawyer on the practice themselves, but they're constantly showing off like their other lawyers' wins, right? Of what they're doing, the impact that they're making. So it's not all you. And then people can just associate with the fact that like this is what this firm stands for as a whole. And then perhaps when they reach out to you, even though you may be in the marketing material, you may be in like commercials and that sort of thing, they will associate the firm with a quality standard and a standard that they can essentially expect a certain level of representation, as opposed to wanting to work with the firm owner directly.
Absolutely. And one thing I would say even about standards is documented standards. And so the team must know what great looks like. They cannot repeat this just because you said, oh, I do it this way. Like it needs to be repeatable. It needs to be scalable. And that's the only way that you'll ever get out of it.
I mean, look, you don't go to Wendy's and expect Wendy to be there, right? I was like trying to think of somebody like, a Colonel Sanders to be, a Kentucky Fried Chicken, right? Or Ronald McDonald, right? So.
Noted. I think we got the point across.
Yeah, you guys get the idea. Like, or J.P. Morgan Chase.
Okay, we're gonna move on to question
or Charles Schwab. I mean, the list goes on and on.
It does. I think we got the point there.
All
right, we're gonna move on to question number 3. Hi, Michael. I've been listening to your podcast for years now. I run a family practice that's been growing steadily over the past 3 years. We've gone from just me and a team of 6, including 2 other attorneys. I'm at a point where I'm spending about 70% of my time managing the team and only 30% doing the legal work I'm passionate about. The problem is I hate the day-to-day management and I miss being in the courtroom. I'm also not sure if I'm the best person to be managing everything. What do I do about this?
Well, this was pretty easy. And I like this question because it's the opposite of one of the earlier questions, right? Of essentially getting out of the legal work to be able to grow and scale the practice. But let's say that that's just not something that you're passionate about, that you enjoy. Like maybe you love working up cases and doing the legal work. If that's something that excites you and gives you energy and it really is the highest and best use of your time, play to your strengths. Like absolutely. I'm a big believer in focusing on accentuating and developing strengths as opposed to developing weaknesses, right? Like your strengths are your strengths, right? And that's something that makes you unique and it gives you a unique advantage. So why not continue to invest in that? And the answer really put simply could just be, look, if you're only spending 30% of your time doing the things that you enjoy and add unique value to, and the other 70% of your time is being spent doing, management and things that just are not your strength, that you don't enjoy. I mean, imagine what a life could look like if you spent 90% of your time, or maybe even 100% of your time doing the things that you love and that you enjoy and you add unique value to. Imagine like what your life would be like, even just from, when you forget like just firm growth and revenue and all that, just imagine just overall like personal satisfaction and happiness and so on, and fulfillment. So the single best thing you can do at this point is, look, those tasks still need to get done. Like that's the asterisk. You can't just do the things you like to do unless you find a way for those things to still get done without you doing them, which usually comes in the form of hiring a person that likes to do those things and is good at doing those things. So maybe it's time to hire a practice manager or an operations manager or whatever the title is, but it's essentially somebody who handles the day-to-day office management and the management of the practice, and they report to you, and this is something they love, and it's typically not a lawyer, so don't worry about them interfering with your trial work, but essentially their job is to keep all this stuff away from you. And just because you don't enjoy it doesn't mean there's not a human being that absolutely loves it, right? Like this blew my mind years ago, right? I think this was early on, like 2012, 2013. And I was not the process guy. Like, everybody knows they should have documented processes for every aspect of their business, right? SOPs. Everybody knows, right? You can go to every business conference, they're like processes, right? And people come out with these light bulb moments saying, oh, no shit, I should have a process around every aspect of my business. And then they come home and they do nothing about it. And I was the same exact way because I knew I needed it, but I was already like doing a million things. And I also did not enjoy sitting there and writing a documented process. And I thought, man, should I just change my attitude? Who enjoys this stuff? And then I met you. And the light bulb moment for me was that there are human beings on this earth that enjoy the things that I don't enjoy. Like that doesn't make, just because it's a task that you don't view as desirable doesn't mean that it's not extremely exciting to somebody else. Just no different than something that you really enjoy doing could be completely undesirable to somebody else too.
Absolutely.
Right? So like I love just, whether it's presenting at our workshops, at our conferences, doing these podcasts, or getting on like 12 back-to-back calls, right?
Yeah.
For some people, they're like, hell no, I'm not interested in getting 12 back-to-back calls with complete strangers, and that's exhausting. And I end the day energized. At the same time, if you ask me to create a bunch of graphs and charts and do a deep level data analysis or write a ton of processes or do a lot of audits, I'm like, oh man, like bring me the Coke Zero, right? It's going to be a late one. Or just put a bullet in my head right now, right?
Okay, maybe that's
Maybe
a little
not that.
extreme.
Yeah. But the point is that your life, you'll have this unlock once you find and hire this person. In fact, I'd make that your mission. Like that, make that your mission for the next quarter. You find and hire this person, your life will absolutely transform. Absolutely. I can't think of a bigger difference maker than the person that helps you go from like basically spending your time only doing 30% of your time going to things you enjoy and making that, let's even flipping it, let's be conservative. 70% now you're able to spend your time on doing the things that you enjoy and you add unique value to. And now only 30% of time management, like maybe you're still going to meet with them. They're going to give you updates. You're still going to make decisions. Don't get me wrong, but they're going to be able to handle the bulk of it. And what's that worth to you, right? So, and if you're saying, well, they could be expensive, right? So this even goes back to the first question. We come full circle, right? Expensive. It's just what is expensive? It's amazing the way we assign like a monetary amount to certain things, right? It's like, I don't know, just fascinating. Maybe that's a discussion for another podcast, like of just like, what is expensive? We were at Disney World and I joked because I saw this guy walk by and he had this shirt, like everybody had these shirts that said best day ever. And this one guy was walking by, I thought it was hilarious. He had a shirt that said most expensive day ever. And I'm like, that's awesome, right? So I made this post on social media and I said, most expensive day ever. And I was like, our family photo from Disney. And every comment there was like, but it's so worth it. It's so worth it. It's like, it's priceless.
Right.
Right. So you can look at it and say, okay, like a trip to Disney with your family is so-called, in quotes, expensive.
Right.
But people who take their family to Disney and they see their kids with like just tears of joy, they're like, no, that wasn't expensive. It's totally worth it. So I'd look at it the same way when you're finding and hiring this person. You may think, okay, but it's expensive. But how do you put a price on being able to like completely transform the way in which you spend your time and your quality of life, and it brings you fulfillment? I promise you, anybody who has found this human being, and we work with, 1,100 law firms that have, this person's worth their weight in gold, right? They will literally save your life. So, and then not to mention, now that you're able to focus on the things that you love and enjoy and are higher and best use of your time, the firm's probably going to grow, and you're probably going to not just increase revenue, but you're going to increase profitability. The person's going to pay for themselves faster than you can say Disney World, right?
Faster than you can say thingamajigger, or most expensive day ever. So you think about it, I don't think that anyone has ever overpaid for an A player, right? Like I've yet to find someone. I ask them, and I'm like, hey, think about someone in your office who's like an absolute like A player, rock star. And I'm like, do you think they're overpaid? And they're like, no. Well, all the B and C players are overpaid. A players never overpaid. No.
So there you go. There you have it.
All right. That rounds us out today.
All right. Till next time.
You've been listening to the Game Changing Attorney podcast with Michael Mogill. If you found this episode valuable, here are 3 free ways that we can help you grow your law firm. Number 1, download the first chapter of Michael's book absolutely free at gamechangingattorney.com. Number 2, you can shoot Michael a text at 404-531-7691 and ask him any question you'd like. You might just hear the answer on the next episode. And finally, number 3, if you can leave this podcast a 5-star review, it will help us gain access to more influential thought leaders and bring their lessons learned here to you. For more information on this episode, see the show notes in your podcast app or visit legalpodcast.com.